The course which we're gonna study in this semester is ME326. Course code is ME326. The course name is Manufacturing Technology 1. So which is a 3-credit course. We don't have any practicals and also no tutorial in this course. Scope and objective of the course. This course basically discusses about the manufacturing technology practiced in mechanical industries such as joining, forming, casting and other processes. What are the other processes that we're going to study? So let's discuss about them in the coming slides. What are the other processes we are studying? So the textbooks referred are, the main textbook is Ghosh A and Malik. The title of the book is Manufacturing Science, published by EWP Private Limited, which covers almost 80% of the syllabus. What we have, 80% of the contents are covered in this course. Along with this main textbook, we have 3 more reference books. So reference book 1, P and Rao. The title of the book is Manufacturing Technology Volume 1. And other references R2 which is given, that is also P and Rao. Manufacturing Technology, that is Volume 2. Both are published by TMH Publications. And one more reference book is given, that is Hajra Chowdhury is the author. Hajra Chowdhury is the author. Workshop Technology is the title of the book. Dhanpat Roy publication, published by Dhanpat Roy Publications. So this is the course what we're going to study in the current semester related to the manufacturing. So the course Manufacturing Technology 1, course code is ME326. Let's have a quick walkthrough of the contents of this course, what we are studying in the current semester. Introduction to manufacturing processes. The very first part of the contents what we have here is Introduction to manufacturing process. So this entire circle here, this entire circle, which the circle embraces the total contents of casting process. So the first part or the first segment of the contents is something which is related to the casting process. So all these molding materials and their requirements. So in the coming classes we can understand what molding materials and their requirements are, but as of now this entire circle, this entire course here, this entire syllabus here is related to the casting process, or I would say metal casting. So in that, molding materials and the requirements, patterns, so types and various pattern materials, different various casting process, sand casting, pressure die casting, centrifugal casting, continuous casting, thin roll casting, and additionally we have mold design, and finally casting defects and the remedies, how the casting defects can be avoided. So this is the first part of the contents. So which is completely, this complete circle is something which gives us casting process. Then second segment, or I would say the other segment of the contents, is metal joining process. So generally in mechanical engineering we come across the process welding. Whenever we say that there is something joining process happens, we come across the word welding. So basically here in this segment we study welding process, various welding processes you see: solid state welding methods, resistance welding, arc welding, submerged arc welding, inert gas welding, welding defects and inspection. Additionally, we have two more terms here, something called as brazing and soldering. We also study in brief, in detail what brazing and soldering is in this metal joining process. So it is a combination of welding, brazing and soldering. So this is the second segment of the entire syllabus what we have in the manufacturing technology 1. And the third segment is metal forming process. What is metal forming process? Let me give an example of something. Suppose we have a sheet metal. This sheet metal has to be processed. It undergoes various processes to get the final shape. For example, I need to form a design. I need to design the cab. For example, I need to build up the body of a car, which is a cab design now. Now this metal sheet will go through many processes to get the final design of the cab, or I would say final design of this car body. So we have many examples like that. So this is for your example, something like this where you are forming the metals, where you are shaping the metals, is something that we're going to study in this metal forming process. So various processes that we study are forging, rolling, extrusion, wire drawing, sheet metal working, spinning, swaging, thread rolling, superplastic deformation, metal forming defects. Powder metallurgy, and also we have powder metallurgy and its applications. So these are the three major, or I would say these are the three contents subdivided. Once again we look into the total contents of the subject what we have. So first thing is we have casting process here. So various terms related to the casting. And second segment of the contents, or second part of the contents, is metal joining, where we study brazing, soldering and welding. And third is metal forming processes. So the entire contents are covered now. All the contents are covered. So all the contents of this course are categorized in three ways. Categorized into three, that is casting. Second one is joining, where we study welding. And third one is something what we study metal forming. So these are the contents of the entire course of manufacturing technology 1. So having known what are the contents we study, let's start with introduction of metal casting. What is metal casting? Metal casting is one of the oldest shaping methods known, metal shaping methods, Casting, what exactly casting means? Casting is something, a process in which a metal has to be melted to a molten state, and this molten metal will be solidified into the required shape of the final desired component. So this process in brief is known as a metal casting. So this solidified object is called as casting. So once you solidify, in order to get the required desired shape, what you what your intention is to, this final product, this final solidified product is something called as casting. For example, I need to produce cylinder of an IC engine. What I do is I melt the metal and solidify it so that it forms the shape of the cylinder of IC engine. Now this solidified IC engine cylinder is something what is termed as metal casting, because it is formed from metal, molten metal. So this is a metal casting. So this gives an idea that metal casting is a very old method of producing components, very old manufacturing methodology. So let us see some casting products. You can observe clearly, see there are so many products here, many products which are related to IC engine, which are related to the automobile, which are related to many other machines. They are manufactured using metal casting. So metal casting is a very big manufacturing process. I would say most of the components are manufactured through metal casting. So this is something what, in brief, what metal casting process is. So in detail now we study what is metal casting. What is metal casting? So this figure shows something what happens in a metal casting process. So before looking into this figure, let's watch a video which shows us what is a metal casting. See, I need to form something, a component which is shown here, something which is shown here, this one. I need to form a metal component of this shape. So for that, what I do, I prepared something called as a pattern. So this which is inside the molding sand, which you are seeing, that is a metal, that is a wooden pattern, so which is kept under the sand now. So now it is completely covered with the molding sand. This portion, this sand is known as molding sand, so which is kept in a box. So observe this, there is some box here. So this is a wooden pattern now, this wooden pattern which is shaped according to the final component what we need. I need to have this component. So this half of this wooden pattern, the other half is kept in this one box, in this box which is shown here, this box. So there is a second box which is taking the other half of the component. So this other half is also made of wood. It shows, it is seen in different color in fact, but that is made of wood. So it's two wooden patterns, half in one box and the other half in the top box, lower box and upper box. Now these two boxes are having the final product which is intended to get, half in one box and the half in other box. So once these two patterns are kept in two different boxes, see the sand is compressed, This compression of sand is known as ramming process. Ramming means we need to apply force on the sand such that there isn't any gap in between the sand, and it has to be cleanly compacted. Once this compaction is done, once this is done clearly, now what we do is we remove the pattern. This wooden pattern is removed, so this cavity is formed now. So this cavity, once this cavity is formed, see, we remove the pattern. Once this cavity is formed, we made holes on the top. So 2 holes are made. So these holes will carry molten metal where the cavity is formed now. So these holes, see, we are pouring molten metal through a hole which is formed on the top. So this molten metal will fill the cavity which is inside this molding sand, which is formed in the molding sand. So after 15 minutes, we remove this. See what happened. So we remove the boxes. So this cavity is filled with molten metal, and this molten metal is solidified. This solidified metal is something called as a metal casting. Now this is, see, this is the final product, and then we need to machine it according to the required shape. If there are any additional projections, then we need to machine it clearly. So this is what the metal casting process is. Basically, this is a metal casting process. So now going back to this figure again, see, this is what happened in the video. This is what we have seen in the video now. So there is a hole. This one, and here there is one more hole. This hole is something called as a pouring basin. What we do is we pour the molten metal through one channel or one hole. This hole is something called as a pouring basin, and when we pour the molten metal through this pouring basin, it fills the cavity. So cavity is something which is shown in the green color here. So mold cavity. So once the pattern is removed, so we formed it formed a cavity according to the shape of the pattern which is already which was already used in this casting process, which is shown in green color. Now this cavity is filled with molten metal. So once it flows through this sprue and comes, so there is a blind riser. I'll let you know what is the purpose of this blind riser. So once this cavity is filled up, we let it solidify for some time, 15 or 20 minutes depending upon the size of the component. Your solidification time also changes. So once it got solidified, these are the 2 boxes now. Top box is known as, which we have seen, the wooden boxes were seen. So this top box always is named as a cope, and bottom box is named as a drag. Okay, whenever we have 2 boxes, the upper box is known as a cope and lower box is known as a drag. Now once it is solidified, we remove all this molding sand. So this is all molding sand here. See this entire portion, so which is inside, that's completely molding sand. So now the sand will be taken out to get the final product. So this green one which is solidified, that forms a casting now. So this core sand, okay, this core sand, what is the purpose of the core sand? For example, I need a hollow portion, so I should place something in between so that I'll get, for example, green cylindrical shape is something what I need to get. So then what I do is I'll place something in between. So cylindrically this entire cavity is formed now. So now this core is something which is used to get hollow portions. Now this portion is hollow. Metal will not fill this portion because this is again a core. So the metal will fill this green portion, which forms hollow cylinder or hollow portions, whatever the shape we require. So this is something what we have seen in the video. So going with one by one now. What is the purpose of riser here? So what happens is when you pour the molten metal, it fills up this cavity, but we don't know whether it's completely filled the molten cavity or not if you don't have any hole here. So what we do is, to ensure whether the molten metal completely fill your cavity or not, we made a riser here. That is one more hole. So once the molten metal comes up, if you're able to see from the top that molten metal filled this riser, then we can ensure it completely filled this cavity and filled the riser. So that is the purpose. And also the other purpose of this riser is, so during solidification what happens is, the molten metal, the size of the molten metal, I would say the volume of the molten metal get reduced during solidification, and this will result in the shrinkage of the casting. In order to compensate this shrinkage of the casting, this molten metal which is filled in the riser will be helpful. It will compensate that. Also this blind riser does the same thing here. Then going with the next, something called as a vent. So what happens is, this molten metal is of very high temperature. Now hot gases are there. Now if these hot gases are not let out, if there isn't any passage to go out, then these hot gases will be captured inside the casting, or I would say captured inside the molten metal, which forms small blowholes inside the casting. So in order to avoid that, we will intentionally form some holes of very thin size, which is shown in the figure. Thin size, very thin size, and these are vent holes, or I would say vent is there. Pouring basin, I already told you that's the purpose of the pouring basin, is to pour the molten metal. Flask is something box. Potting line, which separates your cope and drag portion. Runner is something where your molten metal flows through, and mold cavity, that is according to the shape of the pattern. So this is something what we have seen in the video. Basically this is what the metal casting I would say this is a sand casting, metal casting process, which is done with the help of sand. So there are many other casting processes which we're going to study in the coming lectures, but the basic sand casting, which is a very old method of producing components, oldest method, which is there from BC onwards, I would say before Christ. So it's a very old manufacturing process. So these are the casting terms. Then flask. So in the casting terms, I will tell you what a flask. Flask is the box, the cope box, trap box, what we have seen in the video, wooden boxes. They can be metal boxes also. In this case, they are the metal boxes. So these are the flasks. So pattern. What is pattern? Replica of the final object to be made. We have seen in the video, I need to form a component. So in order to form that component, I need to prepare a model of the same component what I need to manufacture. For example, as I told you earlier, if I need to manufacture an IC engine cylinder, I need to have a model of IC engine cylinder. Now using this model, I will form a cavity in the molding sand, or using the molding sand. So now this mold cavity is formed according to the pattern, or I would say pattern is something replica of the final object. Potting line, I have seen already. Molding sand, it is a sand, but how this sand is different from general sand. So it is having the specific properties. So it is a mixture of silica sand, clay and moisture in appropriate proportions. So the mixture of silica sand and clay is something which forms a molding sand. So not all the sands can be used as a molding sands. So facing sand, so some carbonaceous material sprinkled inside the surface of the mold cavity. So for the better surface finish, what happens if molten metal is solidified, if it is completely molding sand over there, there is a chance that some projections of sand are getting into the molten metal, that is some projections of sand are there into the casting. So in order to have a very good surface finish, we use a facing sand, which is a smooth sand. Core, I told you, that's to form a hollow portion. Pouring basin, we already seen this. Sprue, runner, gate, chaplet. Chaplet is something which supports the cores here. See, chaplet is something which supports the core. So suppose a core has to be placed. Now this core has to be supported with some something, you know, that supporting portion or supporting component is known as a chaplet. So riser is already discussed. Vent is a hole. Steps in making sand casting. What are the steps we have in making the sand casting? There are 5 basic steps in the metal casting we have. What are the 5 basic steps? First one is pattern making. So that is a replica or the model of the final product which is to be manufactured. That has to be done. So the first step is the pattern making. Core making. So core is something, if you have a hollow portion within that, then we need to have a core. That core will ensure that molten metal is not filled there in order to form that hollow portion. Now this is something what we need to do, core making. Then molding. Molding is molding sand. We have to compress it, we have to ram it. So to form that compacting of sand is nothing but molding process. Melting and pouring. So what do you melt here? Melting of metal. So whatever the metal we need to use, suppose we need to manufacture a metal using cast steel. Now this metal has to be melted first. If we are making something using aluminium, now aluminium has to be melted first. So this melting has to be done, and pouring, obviously we need to pour into the mold cavity. Cleaning, and finally once it is solidified, then you need to clean it, you need to machine it in order to remove any projections, and we need to clean it if any no, because it is made in sand, obviously it's not so clean, we need to clean it. So these are the 5 basic steps. 5 basic steps we need to do in sand casting process. So pattern making, core making, molding, melting and pouring, cleaning. So these are the steps what we have in metal casting process. Okay, let's have a review of what we have studied. So we introduced the contents. Okay, so let's have a look into the contents. Basically the contents are, as I told you, the contents are divided into 3 categories in metal casting. Second one is metal forming process, and other one what we have is joining, where we study welding and other allied processes. So going back again, so this is something which gives complete idea of how the sand casting is done, We also can understand different terms here used in the sand casting process. Flask, so that's with cope and drag box. Pattern, so all these terms are discussed. And finally steps in sand casting. So 5 basic steps in sand casting: pattern making, core making, molding process, melting and pouring process, cleaning process. So again they are discussed in detail how everything is done, how pattern making is done, how core making is done, how molding is done, melting and pouring, how it is done, and finally cleaning. Okay, so what is cleaning? Cleaning refers to all operations necessary to remove sand, scale and excess metal from the casting. Burred on sand and scale are removed to improve the surface appearance of the casting. Excess metal in the form of fins, wires, potting line fins and gates is removed. Inspection of the casting for defects and general quality is performed.